and hopefully, does that move on to the next slide for everyone?
It does, yeah.
Perfect. Okay, yeah, just let me know when you want to move on to the next slide.
Yeah, no problem. And just quickly for the animations, it should be in bold in the notes if you can see that, if that helps you. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Apologies, thank you everyone. So yeah, those are the 3 objectives, just to understand resilience, what to look out for, the strategies, you know, when your child is finding things difficult to cope and things don't go to plan. And then our 3rd and final is just to know where to go if and when needed. So next slide, please. So as we've got there, just the group agreement, if we are engaging with the chat today, just as I've said already, be mindful of personal views and be reflective, ensure confidentiality. If we can, avoid the use of personal identifying information and only share or contribute what you feel comfortable with today. There's absolutely no pressure. If you just want to sit and listen, that's absolutely fine. And please respect and value all of our thoughts, opinions and experiences. Next slide, please. So did we manage to share the Padlet link? Lovely. Yeah. So thank you. So Sam has just popped into the chat a Padlet link, and we'd just like you to take a moment to introduce yourself, but in the shoes of your child. So think about why you're here today, what has brought you to this workshop, you know, in terms of your child. So how old you are if you're in the shoes of your child, what kind of worries do you have, and what would you like your parent or carer to get from coming to this workshop today? And then we're just going to see if there's any sort of themes. Have we had any responses, Sam?
No, we haven't yet, Michelle, but I can certainly speak as a parent if you'd like me to.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Yeah. So if I were one of my children, I have a 17-year-old who seems to really be struggling with anxiety at the minute, but it just seems to be coming from he goes to a further education college. And I just think it's struggling with life, full stop. It's struggling with, I don't know if it's a rollover from the pandemic and everything that has brought. I think social media has a huge part to play in it, in terms of just the influence of friends and peers and the pressure that puts on. So yes, as a parent, I can say I definitely have, you know, a young person who's struggling and has been for a while. And I'm sure that must be a common theme amongst other parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have another, I think one comment, someone's just said, you know, some ideas of how to support my child when they're having difficulties and anxieties. So I think sort of just general anxiety seems to be a theme. I can see some other people are typing, so I think maybe it's just a bit of thought going into it, people thinking the best way to express things. But
yeah, of course.
So we've had Ruth in the chat has put, I'm 11 years old and I feel very anxious about friendships at school. I am struggling and this causes me to be very negative on myself and hit myself.
Okay, thank you for sharing.
In terms of the Padlet, we've had another comment about it would just be great to have some ideas of helping with anxiety and bullying issues. Thank you very much. We've just had somebody else put 13-year-old daughter, anxiety, life getting on top of her, thinks she has the worst life in the world. Yeah, I'm with you on that. Both of my children do. I don't know if it's a generational thing, but yeah.
No, it's really difficult, and I really hope that the strategies that we share with you today and just sort of the sort of background information that we're going to give you will just help you to maybe understand what is going on for them, and if there are interventions that you can put in place for them, and if it does get too much, just sort of where it is that you need to go to you know, intervene and to support your child. So thank you so much for sharing, everyone. Was there anything else that you wanted to add, Sam?
Bear with me 1 minute. I'm just refreshing.
Thank you.
Somebody else would really like to know, where can we get help to help them? I'm really hoping that today is going to go a long way to doing that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm confident that you'll feel more confident after this workshop. So thank you. Thank you everyone for contributing to that. I think we'll move on to the next slide. We will make sure that we see everyone's comments as well. But yeah, let's go. Over to you, Sarah. Are you there?
Okay, sorry, I was distracted by something else. I do apologise. Okay, so let's take a look at our first objective then, which is looking out for the signs of when resilience is beginning to suffer. Next slide, please. In order to do that, it's a good idea for us to just have a bit of a shared understanding of some of these words that are kind of used so much at the moment: well-being, resilience and stress. So starting first of all with well-being, which is quite simply the state of being comfortable, healthy or happy, as you can see on the screen there. And it's, if you think of it more as a state of being or a snapshot in time of how we're feeling in ourselves at any one moment. Whereas resilience is the ability to recover quickly from difficult or unpleasant situations. It's a skill. So we can get better, we can learn to be more resilient, and it can change over time. And then we've got stress, which, as you can see there, is a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or demanding circumstances. And there is a kind of complex relationship between each of these. Many people assume that people who are resilient don't suffer stress. Well, that absolutely is not the case. The key difference here is that people who are resilient or more resilient have ways of managing that stress and dealing with it. And then that clearly has an impact in a positive way on our well-being. Next slide, please. So just digging a little bit further down into the resilience area of that, because that's really what we're going to focus a lot of our strategies on today. You can see this, saying on the screen. I'm sure you've all heard the saying, failure is not an option. Well, when we talk about resilience, failure is not only an option, it's absolutely required. It's part of promoting resilience. Being resilient means that you face those stresses in life. You don't eliminate them or avoid them. To be resilient means you learn from your mistakes and don't avoid making them. I mean, we do, don't we? We try and avoid making them as best as we can. But being resilient means that we rebound from that failure, and it makes us stronger for the next one that is inevitable. It's just waiting for us a little bit further down the path. So we are gaining resilience and learning from our mistakes during this workshop today for sure, and any more that come our way, we're doing it all in the name of resilience. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So it's really helpful to know the common characteristics of low resilience and what behaviours your child might exhibit when their resilience is slipping, so that you know when you should encourage that they engage in sort of resilience enhancing activities. So please remember that not everyone exhibits the same characteristics, and they can range from mild to severe in nature and obviously can last for varying durations. But here are some of the common characteristics of low resilience. So the first one is getting angry quite quickly and feeling irritable. And this is one of the most common characteristics of low resilience, and this often leads to conflict. So, for example, being more argumentative with peers, with family members, being quick to fight about an issue. Another characteristic is frequent illness. So since our immune system is depressed when our resilience is low,
well, it looks like, I don't know if Michelle's had a problem with her connection there. I don't know if Sarah, maybe you could carry on, and then maybe if we see Michelle's rejoins, maybe. I don't know if we'll have a look, see if we can get Michelle back. I don't know what's happened there, but Sarah, I don't know if you're happy to take over for a moment, and we'll see if we
Sure.
Michelle, you're back.
Oh, we lost you, Michelle, temporarily, so definitely some gremlins on the line tonight.
Yes, the gremlins this afternoon. Yeah, I don't know what's happened with technology.
Okay, Michelle, we can't hear you now for some reason. Okay, if we move on to the next part of this, which is sleep issues. So sleep issues are often common in those who have low resilience. I can certainly identify times in my life where I've suffered with that. And unfortunately, lack of sleep and low resilience can become interlinked, because if someone experiences poor sleep on a regular basis, this can also impair their resilience, as their tolerance of situations is a lot lower. I'm sure we've all got experience of that. And as resilience diminishes, people can sometimes start to isolate themselves as well from other people, or they go in the opposite way and become quite clingy and too dependent on having family or friends around them. So there can be quite extremes of behaviour on this spectrum, but all for the same reason. And as resilience decreases, there can be a change in our body's hormones, and that causes mood swings. Just to go on top of the delightful mood swings that we get with our teenage children anyway. And we can experience extreme highs and lows, sometimes several times a day. A person with low resilience may sometimes overreact and become enraged by things that would usually not affect them, and things that may be seen as small irritants can become major problems and exaggerated. Some people with a low resilience find they feel sad a lot and cry more easily than they would do normally. It can also impact our memory and our ability to absorb and retain new information. And the most troubling characteristics of low resilience is the lack of hope and that despair that can descend, and a vision for the future. This can sometimes evolve into despair and makes it hard to plan and problem solve, and can manifest as cynicism and a lack of caring. People may also find themselves taking unnecessary risks or engaging in reckless behaviour because they just don't care, and that's clearly something that is quite a serious warning sign to be on the lookout for. And these are just a few examples of the types of warning signs we might start to notice. There are many more, but they're not weaknesses, but signals that something isn't quite right, and we need to stop and take a closer look. Just like the warning light on our car dashboard that might flicker at a very minor car problem, but that clearly, if you ignore it, can escalate into something that is much more serious. And just a final note on this, that some signs are less obvious than others. And when dealing with our children, with ourselves and each other, it's about picking up on a change in what you would recognise as being typically normal for them. Are you back, Michelle? No. Okay, I'll carry on. Right, so there's a few that, you know, that all sounds very doom and gloom, doesn't it? But we're going to now look at some of the things that we can do, the positives about this. And before we get into that, I want to draw your attention to the stress bucket. Many of you are probably already familiar with it, but it's such a good analogy that we can't not do some work with it today. So the idea is that everybody has a bucket, and this represents our ability to cope with the stresses that we face day to day in life. The small things, the big things, everything, which actually is represented in this analogy by water that flows into our bucket. And you can imagine the water level in the bucket is rising and rising and rising nearer to the surface, and the inevitable will happen if nothing else changes and we just keep taking on all of this stress. It will reach capacity and we will overflow. And this is where those mental health problems can start to develop. And those warning signs that we just talked about may already have started to present before we reach this point. And what we're trying to do is intervene to prevent this spilling from occurring. The good news is stress buckets, we can have taps on our buckets. And this is a metaphor for those things we can do to cope with the stress. So those really resilient people, they've got these taps on their buckets and they're working really well to release the water, to prevent this overflowing situation from occurring. Needs to be mentioned here as well, we can have taps that we think work on our buckets, or open them, and they don't. They actually don't help, and actually over time can make things worse. These are the unhelpful coping mechanisms that all of us, including our children and young people, can turn to, thinking it's going to help in the short term, but actually it doesn't help. So hopefully a refresher if you haven't already come across it, or something new. So, as we know, stress can really hijack your brain and grab your attention. Have you ever tried to not think about the thing you're stressed about? It's pretty much impossible. So, trying to suppress the thought or image of whatever is stressing you usually just reinforces it. And to highlight that idea, we'd like you all now to take a moment to think about anything that you want, except for a white polar bear. Anything you want, but definitely not a polar bear. Absolutely anything you want, but not a white polar bear. How's that going for you all? Did trying to suppress the image actually work? Generally speaking, suppression is not an effective strategy. It's an unhelpful coping mechanism. It's one of those taps that just don't work. So hopefully this highlights that point to some degree. Okay, so moving really quickly on, we're going to have a look at the 5 areas model, which is also known as the CBT model, cognitive behaviour therapy. So it's used by trained therapists for children and adults with mental health problems, but it can be really helpful to use this model to help to understand the relationship between these areas that the diagram will highlight, so that you can support your child and help them to understand why the thoughts and the feelings and the behaviours are occurring. So let's have a look. First of all, we've got the situation. So what's happened? Perhaps we've got something like schoolwork is being criticised, a fallout with a friend. This then leads to our thoughts. So the thoughts instantly start to appear. Our minds are just working all the time, round the clock. I'm not good enough, I'll fail at this, or no one likes me, everyone's talking about me, etc, etc, etc. So these thoughts then lead to the emotions, and this is the way it makes us feel. So for example, we might begin to feel sad, we might begin to feel hopelessness, lonely, guilty, angry. There's a long list. But hopefully you can start to see how the situation leads to the thoughts, which then leads to the feelings. And then we've got the behaviours. So our behaviours provoke physical reactions, and this is what our body does. So we might cry, we might shake, changes in sleep or eating habits, and kind of muscle tension, and all those types of things can start to appear. So this demonstrates how easy it can be to get into a vicious cycle. Behaviour then affects our thoughts, our emotions, and it continues until we change how we think to create a more positive cycle. So we need to interrupt this cycle to change it into something more positive. And by using some of the different strategies that we'll discuss today, we can hopefully help you to recognise and just help your children to recognise even maybe some of the triggers that are involved in this process. And actually on the next slide you can see in your resource pack we've included this as a blank template, so you can actually go through it and try and unpick some of this with your child at home. So thank you. That moves us swiftly on to look at the strategies to support your child when they're finding it difficult to cope or if things don't go to plan. And this is where we're going to take a little look at the circle of control. So if you were to write down all the thoughts that race through your mind, would they look similar to this? Now, this is a bit of a scary picture, I think, and it could be even more complex than that, but it's fairly typical. Our brains are coping with so much at any one moment in time in this day and age. So the same is likely to be happening for your child who is experiencing low resilience, potentially. Yet they don't necessarily have the skills and ability to regulate and prioritise. So this can become very overwhelming. And the circle of control is a really effective tool to help build resilience and help us to regain some focus and be mentally stronger. So the strategy can be done as a quick activity or on a regular basis, just to check in with what's going on. And it can be done with your child, or even, you know, it's helpful for us to do this so that we can understand it when we're struggling. And the model looks at where we... Yes, excellent.
Would you like me to take over and give you a break?
Go for it, Michelle. Welcome break.
Okay, so yeah, the inner part of the circle is known as the circle of control. So it represents all of the circumstances, issues, problems that we have direct control over. So thoughts come and go, and what we choose to sort of linger on is a big part of what creates our reality. And then you've got the larger outside, sort of outside of the circle, which represents everything that is beyond our control. So this includes problems that we can do nothing about, such as our past, situational realities, the weather, and this is a really nice activity to do. So this is something that you could try, as Sarah said, or, you know, as also encourage a child to do as well. Children and adults alike allow these uncontrollable elements to take over their thoughts, and this causes stress and anxiety. And obviously there's no point in investing time and energy worrying about the things that we cannot control. And if we continue to focus on these, then we'll feel out of control and helpless. Whereas if we try to put our energy and time into the things from the inside of the circle, which we can control, we'll have a more positive outlook, and we'll feel empowered, we'll be more confident in our own thoughts and actions. So by using the circle of control, you can support your child to make positive progress in just learning to regulate their emotions, be more resilient, reduce stress, anxiety, and depression. Next slide, please. There's another visual for you there. Thank you. Next slide, please. So we're now going to introduce to you automatic negative thoughts, also known as ants. Hopefully, if we have a little click, a couple of ants might appear. There we go. So negative thoughts are normal. They keep us safe and they help us to learn from our mistakes. However, if they're left to our own devices, they can spiral. And ants make you change the way that you think about yourself, about the world, the people around you. And unfortunately, they are always negative and they make you feel bad. They can stop you from problem solving, and they're definitely unwanted and at times can be believable. So think of it like this. Imagine you're at a picnic and one or two ants at the picnic. You know, one or two ants are on your picnic blanket. That's quite manageable. But when it becomes a swarm of ants, this becomes really annoying, overwhelming, and it will take away the joy of that picnic. Next slide, please. So these automatic negative thoughts, so these ants, can lead to negative thinking traps. So negative thinking traps are patterns of thought, usually with a negative swing, which prevent us from seeing things as they really are. So we're just going to click on, if you can just click through the examples, please, just to have a look and see what sort of thinking traps we might have. So the fortune teller, so thinking that we know the future. The downplayer of positives, so thinking that positives don't matter or don't count. My favourite one is the mind reader, so thinking that you can read people's minds and knowing what they're thinking. So you may look at some of these examples and think, you know, yeah, my child is definitely one of those. And it can be quite helpful to share these thinking trap examples with your child, as they may start to recognise them in their own sort of thought patterns. Next slide, please. So recognising negative thoughts and reframing them to use positive self-talk is just a way of training our brain to reduce stress and overthinking, and it will then improve our resilience. But this does take time, effort and consistency so that we can see a positive change. There's no magic wand, there's no quick fix. It's something that we have to continually do. We're often told that we just need to think more positively about things, but putting this into practice is much harder in reality. And it's important that you don't encourage your child to just ignore the thought and thought stop, as this will just make the idea stick more. So what you can do is examine the thought and replace it with a more realistic and helpful perspective. So the first thing to do after recognising that your child has had a negative thought, get them to catch the thought and just use some of the following questions to encourage them to challenge their ants. So if we just click through the question, so thank you. So is this thought helpful? Is there another way of looking at this? What evidence is there? How would someone else see this? What advice would I give someone else? And is this fact or opinion? Next slide, please. So once your child has challenged their thought, you can now encourage them to do something called reframing. So reframe that thought. So this chart resource is a really nice example which can help your child with the reframing process. So I'll just put an example in here. So this person says, I had an argument with Kyra. The negative thought might be, I have no friends, everyone hates me. And then if we look at the evidence against that, actually their friends Sam and Chloe were nice to them and asked them to the cinema this weekend. So we've reframed that and actually looked at it as it's good to have different groups of friends to support me like I do. And then once your child feels confident with this, you could also look at progressing them on to thinking of more adaptive thoughts, especially for older children, where they sort of take a bit of ownership for certain situations. Particularly if your child is someone who regularly falls under the blamer sort of thinking category. If you wouldn't mind clicking on the screen, please. And I can show that example. Thank you. So the example that I've got on the bottom there, I just don't understand stuff that we're learning in maths at the moment. It's just not going in. And the ant might be, I hate my teacher. She's so rubbish. She can't teach. I'm sure you've all heard that before. But then actually the adaptive thought in that situation is, well, I need to speak to my maths teacher or my tutor about my concerns in maths because maybe I need some additional support in place to help me get on track. So the adaptive thought just helps them to take a bit of ownership, take a bit of responsibility. It can also be really helpful for you as parents and carers to recognise ants in your own thought patterns and, call them out in front of your child and, get them to help you to reframe, obviously if you think it's appropriate with the thought that you're having. But it just shows them that you're modelling this same sort of behaviour as well and showing them that you also have negative thoughts, because as I've said, we all have them. So the process needed to change the negative thought, if you could just click on the screen, please, is catch it, check it, change it. And remember, we're not thought stopping. So if we thought stop, this will just make the idea stick more. Just work with your child to examine and replace it with a more realistic and helpful perspective. So a great tool to accompany reframing and learning to use positive self-talk is using affirmations. We've got some lovely ideas for you in our resource pack, and we obviously do recommend that you seek help if your child's thinking is becoming quite rigid and their expectations are chronically negative, or their feelings are too strong for them to be reflective about their thinking mistakes. And information of where you might go for that is in your resource pack and at the end of this workshop. Are you there, Sara? Do you want me to go? Yeah.
Sorry, Michelle. Yeah, okay. So having conversations with our children, so how they're feeling can be tough, especially if you're concerned that they're having a hard time as well. You might not know what to say or feel worried about your child will react. I know certainly with my teenage boys, those conversations are few and far between, and I definitely know when those times are that they don't want to talk. It's not a good time. But it doesn't matter what topic the conversation starts with, it's about the opportunity it gives you to talk about feelings and provide comfort. So we've got some suggestions on here that again are in your resource pack of different things you can try just to open up that conversation. And you could try by starting by taking 20 minutes just to do an activity together, for example, which you both enjoy, so that going to kind of ease them into, I don't know, a more open state for talking, and get that conversation started. So if we click the screen, please, you can see here some examples. We've got some general examples, the general open questions, you know, how are you feeling? Demands more than a yes or no answer. Then we've got more serious questions there, as you can see. What was the biggest problem you had today? And they're a bit more specific, which sometimes can be a bit more successful in yielding a response. Certainly the experience I've had with my children. And then you've got the fun ones here, which you've got some examples of quite often questions that depersonalize a situation. So, for example, if you were an animal, what would you be today and why? And sometimes that can be a really revealing question and helpful question to ask. Next slide, please. You could also see whether other forms of communication, like writing a letter or texting, would make it easier for your child to let you know what's going on for them. So again, some more examples here and in your resource pack. And remember that you know your child, of course, and you can tell when it isn't the right time to talk, and maybe need to try, just leave it for now and kind of try it another time. And that's okay. Next slide, please. So some do's. So if you are successful with your conversation starters, your child tells you that they're struggling, we've got some examples that are going to appear on the screen. It's important to make sure that they feel seen and heard. So validating their feelings, you could say things like, it's really understandable that you're feeling this way, to let them know that their feelings are okay and it's okay to feel that way. And thank them for sharing, so encouraging them to open up even more, letting them know that you love them, obviously, to kind of reinforce that safe space and that you're there for them and they can talk to you whenever they want about anything they need to at any time, and that, you know, you can get support together if you need to. And then asking them if there's anything you could do that they would find particularly helpful. I know that's worked for me before when talking to my boys. Quite often, you know, giving them the opportunity to come up with the answers themselves. Again, it's putting them in control, and it's quite empowering. Spending time together, thinking about what's making them feel this way, so exploring that together, and letting your child know about the helplines and the text lines and things like that, that again, we will provide to you in the resource pack that comes out to you afterwards. And reminding a child that this is probably just temporary. So providing that reassurance that things can change and that they can feel better. But that for now, you know, you appreciate that it's hard for them. Avoiding conversations at the height of distress, obviously, obvious reasons for that. It's never going to be the right kind of conversation, and can make things feel worse. And giving them your time and your energy, you know, doing something fun with them, and helping them with their self-care activities and things, which we're going to come on to. Just being together. And if you think your child obviously at any time needs professional support, speaking to their GP, school and other people, professionals, as and when necessary. So next we've got a slide with some don'ts. So these are some things, apologies, some of them are a bit obvious, but maybe, you know, certainly some of the things on here I've probably done. Things to avoid. So don't worry. Just saying don't worry is very dismissive. And in fact, these first few points on here are really dismissive and kind of, they do the opposite to validating their feelings. It's just dismissing them as not being important, or you know, it's not going to help. Saying things like it's no big deal. Well, actually, do you know what? It might not be a big deal, but for them right now it is. And until that reframing and these other strategies that we can deploy can change that perspective for them, right now it is a big deal. And saying things like you'll be fine, clearly they all kind of have a very similar impact. There's nothing to be afraid of. Children with low resilience may feel as though they have plenty to be afraid of. judgment, peer rejection, failure, and the list is really, really long. So you can't just stamp out stress with a quick phrase like this. However, you can help ease the fears by opening the door to a conversation and saying something like, let's talk about that together and explore it. At which point you could possibly go into your ants. And things like, you just need to sleep more, you know, that's not really helpful. There's nothing in there that you can use. Or this next one, which is, I'll do it. This takes us straight back to the beginning of our presentation when we say those failures to, you know, they're a crucial part of resilience, and just taking it away from them and doing it is not going to help with that resilience skill for them. And saying things like, it's all in your head, or hurry up and stop thinking about it. You know, our white polar bears are coming back in there. And I think the last one on there is, I don't know what you need. Clearly, you know, really obvious don'ts. If you can try and avoid those, you'll have a lot more success, I think. And obviously, time and practice to learn and build resilience is important. And your child doesn't mean to cling or ask the same questions over and over, or fall apart in the school car park. You know, those meltdowns. Low resilience makes all of these things happen for many children every single day. And again, to seek help if we think that you need it.
Thank you, Sarah. So when children tackle problems on their own or in a group, they will improve their resilience, as we've said. And it just helps them to sort of look at challenges from a fresh perspective, and therefore taking more calculated risks. So problem solving is important in child development because you know, confident, capable children usually grow into confident, capable adults. So a really nice strategy to introduce to your child is the problem solving sequence, which looks like this. So first of all, your child will identify what the problem is, and then they're encouraged to sort of brainstorm possible solutions, and they consider the pros and cons for each of these. Next, they will decide which solution feels like the best one, and then they will need to do it and test out the solution. And then you can ask them to review and evaluate the outcome. What worked? What didn't work? Can they make some changes to make this solution even better? And as you can see there, it's a lovely little cycle that goes round. And it's about showing them that it's okay to get things wrong. It's okay to do a bit of trial and error. So on the next slide here, we've got a template that we've included in your resource pack, which you can use with your child just to help think in a sort of problem solving way. So in order to promote your child's resilience, it's really important to kind of remind all of us about the few basic key ingredients for well-being. So the core elements that we know are important for keeping well. First of all, sleep, everyone's best friend. We want to aim for about 8 hours a night, but obviously it can vary to 6 to 9 depending on the person. But work with your child to look at making changes to their wind down routine, and, you know, if needed, sort of look at strategies to combat any sleeplessness. Next up is stay hydrated. So similarly to how we establish a morning and bedtime routine, you can encourage a child to create, you know, like a water consumption schedule to make drinking water more manageable. It's as simple as waking up and having a glass of water, then at school throughout the day, maybe giving them visual cues just to be helpful as a reminder. Next is obviously eating healthy, a balanced diet. And when I say that, I don't say don't let them eat chocolate, don't let them eat cakes. It's all about moderation and balancing. And obviously your child's body is going to be going through many physical changes, and they need to be supported by a healthy, balanced diet. So, you know, having just a variety of food, cutting down on the foods that are, you know, high in fat, high in sugar, you know, the fizzy, sugary drinks and crisps and cakes and chocolate. As I've said, it's not about completely eliminating them, but just being mindful of those things, and just including more sort of a variety of foods. Then we've got time for school life balance. So reminding your child that they can't actually do it all, you know, all at once, and everything is not equally important. So getting a school life balance can be really hard, particularly when they've got the build up to GCSEs and your child's trying to juggle everything. However, we've got some lovely resources in your parent pack which will support you to encourage your child to get a good school life balance, and support them to organise their time appropriately. And things like making sure they factor in me time and encouraging your child to take a break, whether it's short or longer, planned breaks, just making sure that they take a bit of time each day to do something for them. And then we've got limit screen time. We know this is a tough one, particularly with teens, but it's really important to encourage your child to limit their time on screens, particularly accessing social media and being on their phones before bed. And remember, the phone, having a mobile phone and the internet isn't a bad thing, but it's really good to encourage just a good routine with screen time. This is something that, to be honest, needs to start from you. So ensure that you're modelling the behaviour that you expect to see from them, and this can kind of help to enhance getting this in place. It can also be really good to maybe encourage your teen to not go to bed with their phone in their bedroom. Maybe if you do the same, get them an actual alarm clock, or maybe agreeing as a family to turn off the router at a certain time. I know quite a few families have tried that, so there's another tip there. And then finally, we've just got move more. So the physical activity guidelines for teenagers it recommends 1 hour or more of moderate to strong physical activity daily. And ideally you want it to be aerobic, and using large muscles. But when we say move more, we mean just move more. It doesn't have to be, find with your child what it is that they enjoy doing, whether it's, dancing in the kitchen, going for a walk with friends, going to the skate park, because obviously this is just going to improve their heart, lung health, muscle, bone health, their immune system, and overall improve their mood. So self-care, which is the act of taking an active role in protecting our own well-being and happiness. So I'm sure you can all think of things to help you to relax and unwind. So you should all hopefully know the importance of finding time to take care for yourself, and not just for those around you. So it's really important to act as a role model for your child, so that they're aware of what they need to do to help them relax, have fun and unwind. And when children are experiencing low resilience, they need to know that they can still do something to help themselves. So it's important for them to know, can they take time for self-care when they're with you? Is there a specific space at home? Is it something that you're kind of embedding at home? It's really important, again, to look at what's going to work for your child. What is a form of self-care for one person? It might be going to the gym, running for 10 kilometers. That might be completely different to another person, which might be having a long hot bath and reading a book. It's all about meeting the needs of that person. So we've got a lovely resource in your books, your parent packs, which encourages you to help your child to build a self-care plan, and it looks at the sort of physical, emotional, social and practical elements within that.
Sorry, just replying to something in the chat. So moving swiftly on, I'm going to whiz through this because I'm looking at the clock and I know we're running out of time because of our technical issues, but grounding techniques, a really good strategy. It's all in your resource pack. If we just click the screen, we've got a few examples here, but basically grounding techniques, if you're not already aware, those things that we can do, they're really simple things just to ground us, clues in the title, into the present moment. What that does is it stops us worrying about the future, distracts us from any worrying thoughts that might be taking a hold, and it can stop us thinking about the past. It grounds us in the here and now. So to do that, there's lots of different things and they're really accessible. You can do things like self-soothe activities. So simple thing like taking a bath or a shower and really experiencing those things in the moment, thinking about the sensations. We can use our senses. So there's a really good grounded technique called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So in the moment, you're looking for 5 things you can see using that sense, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can taste, and 1 thing you can touch. I've got those in the wrong order, but it's in your resource pack. And by the time you've done that, you know, it's brought you into the present moment, and actually it's distracted you from those worrying thoughts. Body scans. This is a really good one as well to help with sleep. I've been doing this week, so we can do it wherever we are, but if we're in bed and we're struggling to get to sleep, those thoughts, those ants are gnawing away, just start at your fingertips and kind of start to feel into your body, and it really move, you know, have a system where you work around one arm into the leg, all over your body. By the time you've done that, you'll notice your heartbeat changes, and it just grounds you in the here and now. And it can be a really effective strategy for distraction and stopping those thoughts. And observation, and again, distraction there. There are lots of different things. There's lots of really good distraction ones, actually, where you're looking for things in your environment. Again, you're giving the brain a task to do, which is distracting it from that negative, worrying thought. Check out your resource pack for more information on that. But really, really helpful things to share with your children, to give them those tools that actually they can deploy at any time. They've got it as and when they need it. And practicing these when we're not in a distressed state, obviously, is the ideal thing, so that we can just use them as and when we need them. Next slide, please. You're on mute, Michelle.
Sorry, thank you. I'm also mindful of time, so if you can just click on the 2 images for me, please. Thank you. We've got descriptions of 2 breathing exercises. There's actually some other ones as well in your resource pack, but some breathing exercises that you can also do just to help your child to manage any sort of strong feelings and emotions. And it's a really, really effective technique to help them to relieve stress. Excellent for mindfulness. And these are really good to try and get them into the habit of doing kind of prior to that sort of stressful moment, because they get into the practice of it, it can just help them to relax. So there's the hand breathing and there's square breathing, but these are both described in your resource pack. Next slide.
Michelle, sorry, can I just interrupt you?
Yes.
The Zoom does go on until 7:30, so I've just put a little note in the chat. I'm not saying that we'll go on till 7:30, but I'm just saying if people are happy to stay on, because I know otherwise we're really rushing, then there is that opportunity to. All right.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Journaling. So again, more details will be in the resource pack, because I'm mindful that people are likely to want to ask questions at the end of the workshop. But journaling is a really, really good technique to use and a strategy to use to sort of improve mental health and well-being, stress levels. Again, another one for sleep. And this strategy just allows us to reflect on what's happening for us, what's in our head, in our hearts, what are our thoughts, our feelings. And it can just be used as a kind of brain dump, and, you know, sort of emphasizing that this journal isn't going to be checked by anyone. It's not a school book. Nobody cares about spelling, handwriting. If you've done any sketches, you know, it's that person's special journal, and you can really encourage a child to have a special place for that notebook, you know, special notebook in a special place with a special pen, and particularly works really well before bed if your child is having difficulty with sleeping. It just allows them to empty their minds before going to bed. And, you know, just reminding them, as I say, it's their journal, and trying to get them to think about one positive element from the day is also really good, just because it's, you know, helps them to kind of focus on those positives as well. Next slide, please.
So, where to go for help when needed. Next slide, please. So we've looked at a range of strategies to help you to support children, young people, and hopefully to improve their resilience overall. Even so, you may reach a point where you feel that extra help is required. You know, because remembering, most of us here, we're not mental health professionals, and we're just trying to do the best we can for our children. And we're learning along the way as well. So at any point, you can signpost your children, young people, to appropriate websites. And again, in your resource pack, there will be a list of those that we've tried to cream off a massive list of available websites. There's some really good social media sites as well, and obviously videos and links. And quite often our young people, that's their first place to go for help, but they might not necessarily know the best ones to go to. So hopefully that will help you a little bit. And obviously then being able to do that in their own time again is giving them the power and putting them in control, and that's a positive thing in the whole process because it's building that skill. And it's important to remember as well, obviously, that if you've got any of those, you've got some examples there of times when we would go and seek that professional help. So on the signpost you can see if things are really getting out of hand, or it's really having a negative impact longer term on them being able to function and enjoy life, then that's the time to go and get help, and trusting that gut instinct of yours as well. It's rarely wrong. So again, we've shortlisted kind of general places to go for help here. So some of them more obvious than others: GPs, obviously school nurses, quite often an underused resource, and speaking to safeguarding leads in schools, etc. And then obviously websites we've mentioned. And again, there are specific details on things like this in your resource pack. Next slide, please. So there's lots of places you can go to for additional support, particularly when you might already have gone to somebody somewhere for professional help, but you're on a waiting list. So there are things you can do in that interim period. Got some examples here, and again, there'll be more in your resource pack. So have a look at them and familiarise yourself with them, so that keep them safe, so that you've got them there should a time come that you feel that you need them. Next slide, please.
So just before we take any questions, I just want to summarise what we've covered today. So first of all, it's important to look out for signs of persistent or prolonged stress, of decreased resilience. So remember, it's important to pick up on a change in the individual, in your child, rather than simply working from a list. Second of all, just support your child to understand their emotions and find ways to express how they're feeling, and have a variety of strategies in place to support your child, and ensure that chosen approach is catered for the needs of your child. Obviously, there is no one size fits all. And finally, just to be aware of when and where to signpost. Next slide, please. So if we could just click through all of the strategies. So just to remind you, all we have covered: stress bucket, 5 area CBT model, circle of control, automatic negative thoughts, ants, thinking traps, reframing ants, how to have conversations, do's and don'ts, problem solving sequence, finding balance, self-care at home, grounding techniques, breathing exercises, journaling, when to signpost, and using other support, other sources of support. So thank you so much for attending. If you click onto the final slide, please. We really hope that you found it helpful and useful today, and you can take away some new skills that you can now maybe implement at home with your child. So we would like to invite anyone to ask any questions.
Okay, I've just been sorry, Em, I'm just going to jump on, because what I've been doing is I've been copying stuff from the chat and putting it into a Word document. If I start at the very top, if it's okay with you, Lynn has said, do you think it is helpful or potentially more damaging to tell your child you're worried about their mental health? My 13-year-old tells me she's fine to any question I ask. I want to outright say that I'm worried that she's battling depression, but I worry that this may trigger her and make her feel depressed just on that alone.
Okay, thank you. Do you want me to answer that, Sarah?
Yeah, you start off, Michelle, if you've got something on the tip of your tongue for that one.
So thank you for sharing that. First of all, I guess I would ask the question, you know, just to think about why it is that you think that she is depressed. And then I would recommend, first of all, actually talking to the school, so maybe like a family support lead, or if there's a safeguarding lead or her tutor, just to sort of keep them in the loop, because obviously school staff spend so much time with the children that they may also have concerns. And I think it's about, initially I wouldn't say to her that you are concerned that she's depressed. I would gather more information, so look at the people that work with that child, just to gather all the information that you have, that you can basically, and then kind of I would speak to your safeguarding lead, or as I say, family support worker at school, to see what they feel is the best approach, because they obviously know your child as well. Did you want to add anything to that, Sarah?
Yeah, I think I agree exactly with what you said, Michelle. And I know it's very much about managing our own worries as parents and making sure that doesn't kind of pass on to our children when we're talking to them. So I can see why you're saying that, Michelle, and you would kind of not express that worry and that concern initially, just because sometimes that can escalate things, I guess, into the direction you don't want it to go into. So I think it's sound advice to go and to kind of gather some information from a bit further afield. Does that sound doable? Was it Ruth?
That was Lynn.
Oh, Lynn.
And she says, Lynn's just posted in the chat, that makes a lot of sense, thank you. She shows some sign of depression, and we as a family have had a very traumatic couple of years. So I'd frankly be surprised if she weren't struggling with what's went on.
Yeah. Oh, bless her. I'm sorry to hear that. And I think also, just to add on, it would maybe even be worth talking to her school about, you know, is there any sort of work being done? You know, is there a pastoral lead? Is there any work being done around sort of emotional literacy? Because if she is having difficulty expressing those emotions, then she might not actually know what she's feeling. So I certainly think that the school is the first port of call, for sure.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to go on to the next one. I know that, and I think Ruth may have left. I know that, oh no, sorry, I'll come back to Sam. I know that Sarah said about the doing the ants with Sam, and Sam just wanted to say thank you, Sarah. She says she's been trying anything and everything and has tried ants without knowing about it. Those comments are in the chat, so I'm just going to leave those for the minute. Mandy has asked, is there any survey for the child to do so that the parent can decide whether he or she needs to seek professional help? Good question.
How old do we know how old the child? There are surveys, and what we could do is provide some links to those. There certainly are things like a checkbox that will kind of give an indication as to you know, if it's something that it needs a closer look, basically. Just like the Warwick Edinburgh scale that we can do as adults, there are equivalents for children and young people. So is there some way we can add that in, Sam, to at a later date to make available?
Yeah, of course. I've said in the chat, we won't be sending out, because of the time now, we won't be sending out the presentation or the resource pack until tomorrow, so we can send it all together, Sarah, all together. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. There is, let me just go back. Julia would like to know, do you go into schools with any of this material? Assemblies on strategies such as ants and reframing would be really helpful for children to have access to.
That's so the answer to that question is, all throughout the pandemic, we have been delivering workshops with all of these strategies and more to education staff. We haven't done direct delivery in assemblies directly to children and young people at schools, but we've reached at least 60% of schools across Northamptonshire with those resources, and I know they've been doing similar things in response to the pandemic in different authorities as well. So Yes, I think is the answer to that question, and it's certainly not stopping now. We'll be doing it, you know, kind of well, indefinitely. So
Okay, thank you. And we have one more, and I guess this can go out with the resource pack and the presentation. Sam has asked, do you have a Bucks, Milton Keynes, CAMS consultation line, please? Can we dig those details out and put them in?
Yeah, I think they should actually. I think they are already in the resource pack.
Oh, cool.
I will double check. No problem.
Okie dokie. Okay, there have been, so we haven't got any more questions at the minute, but if I've missed any, please put them in the chat. But there have just been a few comments, and I'll reiterate the same from Anna Michael, the last one. Just saying thank you for all this advice and ideas. I will try some of these with my son. It's great to have a toolbox to use as a parent, and I look forward to receiving the resource pack. Sam has says thank you all very much. I saw James had said thank you very much and was looking forward to using some of these with his son. So yeah, thank you both very, very much.
Thank you. And I think I just wanted to say, Sarah, as a sort of final comment when we talk about resilience, remember that in yourselves as well. It is about trial and error. It is about trying these strategies with your children and seeing what works. And if that doesn't work, that's okay. Try another strategy and really just have confidence in yourself to implement and you know, implement these strategies and support your child.